Welcome back to another video. My name is Derek and today I'm going to show you how to replace the glass only on an Apple Watch. As you can see, this Apple Watch is severely cracked and it's definitely in the need of a new glass. Over 5 years ago, I helped a friend of mine that you guys might know, Jerry Everything, to do a glass-only repair himself. And a lot of the descriptors that he used to describe the process are pretty accurate. So as I do this repair, we'll let him describe what he thinks of each process. Let's get into the video.
So the Series 4 Apple Watch, with its rectangular design and curved glass edges, looks pretty sleek and pristine, unless, of course, it's shattered. Replacement screens can cost almost as much as the watch itself, unfortunately. But what if replacing just the top glass were an option? Today I'll show you that replacing just the glass is indeed an option, while at the same time showing you why this repair should never be attempted by mere mortals. Personally, I've tried multiple glass-only Apple Watch repairs before this one, each time failing catastrophically. This time around I'll have some extra help from a guy who does this on a regular basis. He's found a way to make these impossible repairs possible. But still, without experience, I'd say about 99% of people who attempt this project will fail. Now that the pep talk is over, let's get started.
Here we have the Apple Watch. This is a Series 6. The video that I helped Jerry rig everything on was an Apple Watch Series 4. They do use the exact same glass though, so the repair is almost identical. These actually might be the exact same tweezers that he used in the video. They've seen a little bit better days, but we're going to use them to start the repair in the exact same way that he did, as the same principles apply. I'm going to carefully pick away the shards of glass, and although the Series 6 does not have a force touch sensor like the Series 4 does, it still has a gasket that I'd like to not damage. So I'm going to take my time, and I'm not going to use any heat in this first step.
Removing just the glass on a smartwatch or cell phone is like trying to separate two potato chips that are glued together without cracking either one of them. The concept, of course, is simple, but the execution is near impossible. It's the brain surgery equivalent of smartphone repairs. The initial trick is that the glass curved edge of the Apple Watch Series 4 does not have any part of the display panel underneath it, nor does it have the finger-sensing digitizer under the curve. It does, however, have a super fragile square ring around the bottom edge of the glass that rests up against the metal for the force touch feature, which is kind of essential to the functionality of the watch. I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. This is going to be one of those videos you gotta watch all the way through till the end. I'm not going to use any heat yet, because heat can damage the force touch ring by causing it to delaminate, so I'm gently pulling away the tiny cold glass shards with my fine-tipped tweezers. Is this tedious? Yes. But remember, we are working around layers of technology that are more fragile than potato chips, so slow and steady wins the race.
One thing to note, these light spots, you'll have to look very carefully at them because it could be delamination of the digitizer layer. In this case, I don't believe they are. I believe it's just the way that they shattered, but we'll know once the glass is off. The gasket on this one that serves as a spacer and a shock absorber is actually cut, so I'm going to be replacing it, so I'm not too concerned about damaging it at this point. But I do have a nice entry point to insert my thin piece of plastic.
Once we have the smallest glass chips pulled away from the frame, we can slide a super thin piece of stiff plastic between the glass screen and the force touch ring, taking special care not to damage the fragile ring while sawing my plastic back and forth to help it slip under the glass and slice through the adhesive that's holding it to the black force touch sensor. Pulling up a sliver of glass at the wrong angle can put pressure on the display that's under the glass and destroy it. It's like trying to defuse a bomb that could obliterate the watch at any second. Also keep in mind that holding down the side button for too long literally calls the police. Ask me how I know. Obviously, the more cracked the glass is, the easier it is to work on, because tiny slivers of glass can pull away easier. If the display ends up breaking, with black splotches or the touch sensitivity stops working, the only option at that point is to replace the whole screen, instead of just the glass, which is what we're trying to do here today. Remember, we still can't use heat yet because of that force touch ring. It's still adhered to the metal frame. Every now and then I would run into a snag along the glass edge requiring me to swap out my piece of plastic, or grab my tweezers to shimmy out another piece of glass. I've been at it for about 45 minutes now, going slow and removing each bit of glass individually. These watches are expensive, but if I can salvage this screen by replacing just the glass, I can save quite a bit of money. I'll add each sliver of glass to my glass collection off to the side until I have another opening big enough for the thin piece of plastic. I'll pop it in and start slicing between the glass and the force touch ring. This is a terribly tedious repair that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy.
And I'll carefully work around the sides. I'm going to test again to make sure the watch is still working. We're looking for an image with no vertical lines. This looks good. And then we can peel back the display very carefully. One of the nice parts about this gasket is there's 2 layers to it, which means if I can salvage the bottom one, I really don't have to replace it. I just have to build back the adhesive, which is not difficult. But now the display is free from the frame. We can go ahead with the final part to remove the display so we can work on replacing the glass. We will get out a heat plate. We can take the watch face and set it down. Let it warm up a little bit, and I'm going to be using some isopropyl alcohol to help break the bond between the adhesive and the flexes, as it's stronger than the Series 4. I'll take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, put it right there on the flexes, and we'll let the flexes slowly pull themselves away without tearing the third one, which is a grounder. And we'll keep peeling it away very carefully, adding more heat when it starts to bind up on us. At this point, we can then turn it over, and without scraping the flex cable, we'll get under the sticker and peel it back on both of them, and we'll disconnect by flipping up the latch on the 2 connectors, and then we can gently pull the flexes away from the display.
It might be stressing you out a little bit that the watch is still turned on at this point, but as long as I don't slice my plastic too deep into the watch, the inner cables should be just fine. Nothing's around the edge. I'm leaving the watch turned on so I can easily test and see if I've broken the internal potato chips or not. Once that screen is broken, there's no point in continuing, and I'm better off just buying the whole screen replacement instead of just the glass. Finally, after removing all the little slivers of glass and slicing my plastic under the larger chunks of glass, the whole screen is loose from the Apple Watch body. Everything is indeed still working at this point, which means we haven't messed up yet. Cross your fingers it stays that way. In order to proceed, I need something called a vacuum hot plate. This beauty can suction down objects while heating them up to soften the adhesive. It's a much more controlled environment than using my standard heat gun, and since we're working with small and delicate things, it is a needed piece of equipment for this project. I've taped over all the holes but 9, so we can have all the suction in one location. I'll add another piece of tape over the cracked Apple Watch screen so air won't slip through the cracks and cause it to lose suction. Science. And I'll also turn off the watch. Once the machine is turned on, it'll start warming up the adhesive that's holding the ribbon cables to the back of the screen. You can kind of see them pulling up right here. There are 3 of them, all lined up in a row, and this gives us some wiggle room to reach in and unplug the cables. The adhesive holding down the black tape over top of these connectors is incredibly gooey and sticky and near impossible to remove gently. Thanks, Tim Apple. Normally, alcohol doesn't solve problems, but in this particular case, a drop of alcohol right on top of each of the connectors dissolves the adhesive, allowing the tape to peel back a bit easier. It will become sticky again after the alcohol evaporates. Once the tape is peeled back over all 3 connectors, I can pop the little black latch up at the top, which unlocks the corresponding cable. The latches themselves are extremely fragile, just like everything else we've been dealing with today. Finally, I'll grab a hold of the ribbons themselves and the top of the screen and gently but firmly pull the ribbons off of the screen. It's taken me about an hour to get to this point in the process, and we haven't even started the complex part yet.
I'll carefully peel away the gasket that came off with it. The little shards of glass could potentially damage the display if I'm not careful here. Now we have the display off.
Going back to our vacuum hot plate screen separator machine, this time around I'm going to use some high tensile strength super thin gold colored wire that I'll wrap around my finger to keep secure. This wire is going to be placed directly under the glass layer of the Apple Watch screen, but above the digitizer and screen layers. It's a small, fragile sandwich of high-tech components, and if you pick the wrong layer to slide through, the whole thing is destroyed. I'm not being dramatic, I'm just being realistic. You can see the wire sliding and slicing into one of the gooey layers inside the sandwich. That's the adhesive between the glass and the digitizer, and exactly where we want the wire to stay. It's like trying to separate the 2 halves of a very expensive Oreo, but if you break the cookie part, you lose a couple $100. I'll lift the wire over the remaining curved glass chunks so it won't get caught on the edge or start cutting into the sensitive bits, and then gently keep sliding the wire through the gooey, warmed up adhesive layer. The whole thing is heated to about 80 degrees Celsius right now, and that's keeping the Oreo nice and soft for the wire to slide through. The suction of the machine is keeping the watch screen from moving around too much while the wire is sliding through the adhesive. Once the wire finishes the cut and pops out the other side, the screen is loose and fully free to pull away from that top glass layer. The cracked glass is now removed from the display.
Alright, and there we have the glass off. Carefully rub off the adhesive.
The hardest part of the repair is now done, kinda. The little bit of rubbery adhesive that is left on the screen can be gently rubbed off, keeping in mind that this is like trying to rub flavor dust off of a Dorito, and one wrong move can crack the whole thing. A little bit of acetone can dissolve the rest of those lines and residue on top of the display.
And there we go, nice and clean. I did end up with a couple tiny micro scratches that you probably can't make out right there, but those will get filled in with the adhesive. We'll get out our new glass. As you can see, this watch works for the 4, 5, 6 SE first and second generation. And what's really nice is the back of this actually has the OCA layer to allow you to adhere the display properly. However, not all of you have a laminator or an autoclave, and if you're going to try to attempt it this way, then the best thing to do is simply remove the protector to the OCA, and this will serve for your next Apple Watch repair or iPad repair or whatever to slice in between the frame and the glass. We do still need to remove the OCA layer, but I'll show you that in a second.
I'll clean both sides of the replacement glass and add a dollop of Loca, liquid optical clear adhesive. This stuff is pretty cool actually. It's what's going to hold the glass layer securely to the display. The important thing when setting the glass down is that there's no air bubbles caught under the glass. I did catch one air bubble during my first placement, so I pulled that off and popped it with a pair of fine-tipped tweezers, and then tried setting the glass down again for the second time. Resting the display on top of the Lego allows the display to sit up inside the curve of the glass as it rests down into place. But once again, I caught a little bubble under the glass as the adhesive flattened out towards the edges. It's not a huge deal, it just means that I have to gently persuade that little bubble to migrate towards the edge of the glass with a tiny bit of pressure. This little bit of pressure is also pushing out glue on the underside of the glass that I'll have to clean up later, but as long as the Loca isn't getting on the electronics, I'll be okay. The cool part about this glue is that it's not going to dry on its own. It stays liquid and gives me plenty of time to clear the bubble and make sure the display underneath is totally lined up underneath that glass. The display needs to be centered evenly on every side without any of the copper edges showing. I can shine a light through the underside of the display to make sure everything is proportional.
Alright, so for the actual Loca application, one thing you'll notice is that we used way too much in the video jerry-rig everything. What you really only need is 3 individual drops. Slowly squeezing 1, 2, 3 individual drops. That's all you need. Now we'll come back to our glass, and I'm going to carefully try to roll up, and we're going to peel back and pull off the OCA layer because we aren't using an autoclave or laminator in this video. If you go back a ways, you'll see videos of me showing how to use those. And then one of the tricks to avoiding getting bubbles is right when you're about to install it, what we're going to do is we're going to peel away the protector. That'll create static cling, which will tell the Loca to jump up to the glass. And you might not have caught that on the camera, but it jumped up and there were no bubbles. Now what we'll do is we'll take it around to the back, make sure that it's somewhat centered, and then we'll let the Loca naturally spread to all edges. There's a few reasons to let it naturally spread. One, we don't want to create a high spot or a low spot where the adhesive is thicker or thinner. But 2, we also want it to get as thin as possible so that the touch isn't affected if anyone ever tries to put, say, a tempered glass screen protector on top of this, or a screen protector in general that'll elevate the finger away from the touchscreen even more. So the thinner the adhesive, whether it's OCA or LOCA, Loca, you'll have effective touch. It's almost to all edges. While we let that spread, what I'm going to be using is this UV cure lamp. Here's the SKU if you'd like to get one yourself. And it does have a timer when you turn it on of about 30 seconds before it cuts off. It charges with a USB-C, and it serves for many purposes other than curing loca. You can also cure solder mask. You can set this down on the surface, and with that angle that it has, it'll be able to project the artificial sun rays and cure the adhesive. And as you can see, it's almost done spreading. We've got a little bit more in this corner and a teeny bit more in this corner. But this one and that one, it's spread to nice and thin. We'll let it continue to do its thing until it's ready to be cured. One thing we can do while we wait for that is we can clean up the adhesive seal. I'm going to use some acetone just like we used for cleaning up the display. And I'm going to go around all edges and clean up any debris that's going to prevent the adhesive that we'll use from really getting a good bond against the gasket that remains and the glass. Alright, the loca has spread to all edges, and due to the amount that we applied, we do not have an excessive amount of overspill.
And then I can hit the whole thing with a UV or ultraviolet light. These magical rays of artificial sunbeams are what dries or cures the liquid optical clear adhesive that's holding the glass to the display. It only takes a few seconds for the glue to start hardening, and then a few more minutes for the glass to become permanently attached to the display again. It's pretty crazy stuff. Thumbs up for that. I do have to clean out the seepage from under the display from when I pressed out that little bubble, but once that's cleaned up, I can cure the underside of the glass to keep the edges from running, and then we're pretty much done. I'll grab the screen and pop all 3 of those ribbons back into their corresponding latches and lock the fragile flaps gently down into place. Then, after making sure there is no glass slivers or old adhesive or dust resting on that force touch ring, I can make sure everything still turns on. I'm just as surprised as you are. How's them apples? The touch sensitivity still seems to be intact. I'll make sure to line the antenna tab on the back of the screen up with the slot on the motherboard and set the screen down into place to test the force touch. And it looks like the force touch works. For such a fragile, intricate project, we definitely got lucky.
One of the things that's quite unique about these displays is how transparent they are. In fact, the only reason why we can't see more is because of the NFC pad here on the back. These displays are transparent, which is really kind of cool. And we can use the light behind it to align it, at least on this side, properly. We'll go ahead and cure it with the UV lamp. And I'm going to spend about 2 minutes going around, really focusing on each one of the corners for about 30 seconds. Just to make sure we got good curing. Just to make sure we have good curing for each one of the corners. And then we're going to flip it over and we'll cure the backside just in case there is any overspill around the border. I don't see any, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some peeking out somewhere. Now it's time to install the screen and test it and see if it still works. If we've done our job right, it should. Make sure these little black stickers are out of the way. We'll go ahead and slide back in the delicate flex cables, and then using the little arms that are here on the flex cables, I'm going to carefully push in the connector all the way without slipping with the tweezers and damaging the connector. Once I'm satisfied, we can then push down the sticker so that it holds those flexes in place, and push down the flaps on the connectors, make sure they're nice and solid, and then we'll roll back over the sticker, making it look like no one's ever been in here before. And the moment of truth. Look at that. I'll plug it in to give it a charge, and then we can test it. While we wait, let's talk a little bit about the glue that I'm going to be using. This right here is cold press glue. I used to use T7000, but I found that after about 2 years, the adhesive seals would start to give way. However, I've been using this for 3 years now and haven't had a single issue with separation. The blue tip nozzle that this has on it allows to make a very fine bead. As you can see here, when I pipe it out, I can make it nice and perfect. And with the ability of the trigger here, it can be a consistent bead instead of squeezing on some type of tube. Alright, we have enough to at least test the touch here. And the easiest way to test the touch is to go to power it off, touch the power button, and now we can drag this around. And as long as it follows everywhere corner to corner and it doesn't automatically turn off at some point, we know that the digitizer is totally fine. And given as well that we have no lines in the display, no black splotches, this display is good to go. We'll go ahead and turn it off. Slide that power button. We'll get out our cold press, and I'm going to make a nice fine bead all the way around the border, making sure we don't leave any gaps whatsoever. We want this thing to have the best chance at surviving if it does end up getting wet.
I can add some water-resistant flexible adhesive to the edge of the display. I won't trust the thing to be water-resistant anymore, of course, but the adhesive is going to hold the glass in place, and it's still flexible enough to allow the Force Touch to work. This is an absolutely brutal repair. I've done this exact same procedure on a few smartphones in the past, so I'm familiar with the process. And even with my previous experience, it took me close to 3 hours to finish this watch. This is definitely my first and last successful glass-only Apple Watch repair. If you're wondering to yourself who in their right mind would want to do this, I'll leave a link in the description to my buddy who helped me with this repair. He actually does this repair for other people on a regular basis. It's kinda nice to save a few $100 by fixing a cracked watch instead of buying a new one. Every version of the Apple Watch is gonna be slightly different. I'm pretty impressed with how good this turned out though. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go find some Doritos and Oreos that I can go crunch the crap out of. Come hang out with me on Instagram and Twitter, hit that subscribe button, and thanks a ton for watching.
And we'll close it on up, making sure that everything is aligned properly for the antennas. We'll take some acetone again, and with a microfiber cloth or a clean room wipe, we're gonna go around the border and clean up any of the squeeze out of the cold press before it has a chance to cure. Even though you could wait and clean it later, it's just easier to remove when it's in a liquid state. Now to give this clamping pressure, I'm just going to use a rubber band. A couple wraps. It's plenty strong to squeeze on that display and keep it secure. Enough rubber bands can snap a watermelon. Enough times around a watch will keep it together. We'll leave this for about a half an hour, if you can, for a full 24 hours before removing the rubber bands. And that's how to replace the glass on an Apple Watch. If you found this content useful, go ahead and smash the like button. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If there's something that you'd like to see in a future video, let me know as well. Thanks a ton for watching. We'll see you in the next video.